The first Monday I found them, I thought someone had left the wrong bouquet on the wrong desk. 4 violets wrapped in brown craft paper, damp at the stems, sitting dead center on my desk like they'd grown there overnight. No card, no name. Just that sweet, almost peppery smell cutting through the burnt coffee and printer toner at 7:40 in the morning, before anyone else on the 14th floor had even swiped their badge. I stood in the doorway of my own office for a full minute before I set my bag down. I'm Josie Whitfield. I was 26 that year, 2 years into my first real job as a junior architect at Halley's & Cross. A mid-size firm on the corner of 4th and Union in Seattle, the kind of building with floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the whole office silver when it rained, which in Seattle was often. And that Monday was no exception. I'd moved from Portland 18 months earlier for the job and hadn't made more than 2 real friends since. My life back then was mostly work, a studio apartment where I could hear my upstairs neighbor's washing machine through the ceiling, and now, apparently, violets. I asked around, nobody claimed them. Rachel, the other junior architect and the closest thing I had to a work wife, leaned over my cubicle wall with her coffee and said, "Maybe you have a secret admirer," in the sing-song voice she used when she wanted to be annoying on purpose. "Or someone's dead grandmother left them by accident," I said, and she laughed and we both forgot about it, until the next Monday, and the one after that. By the 3rd week I'd started coming in earlier just to catch whoever it was, and every single time, the violets were already there before me, sitting in that same brown paper. Like the person delivering them had beaten the sunrise itself. "You need a stakeout," Rachel said, feet up on my desk, twirling one of the violets between her fingers. "Set up your webcam. Solve the mystery like a normal, well-adjusted person. I don't have a webcam pointed at my desk, Rachel, because I'm not running a surveillance operation. Yet," she said and grinned. The truth was, some small, stubborn part of me didn't want to solve it. Not yet. There was something about not knowing that made the whole week feel like it was leaning toward something. I'd catch myself on Sunday nights, restless, half-hoping, and I hated how much that felt like hope, which was around the time Daniel started noticing I was distracted. Daniel Cross was the Cross in Halley's & Cross's newer branding, not a founding partner, but the founder's nephew, 31, sharp-jawed. The kind of senior architect who could walk into a client meeting 20 minutes late and somehow make it feel like the room had been waiting for him. He'd trained me my first year. We'd pulled 2 all-nighters together before a permit deadline, eaten cold pad thai out of the same carton at 2 a.m. And somewhere in there, I developed the kind of crush that made me rehearse things to say in the elevator and then say none of them. "You've got a secret admirer," he said one afternoon, leaning against my doorframe with that easy, sideways smile nodding at the violets. Should I be jealous? My stomach did something ridiculous. "Please, it's probably a vendor trying to get us to switch flooring suppliers. Flooring guys don't usually go for violets," he said. "Too romantic, they'd go carnations." "Cheaper margin, you have opinions about flower economics." "I have opinions about everything," he said and winked and left, and I sat there for a solid 5 minutes just breathing. That was the thing about Daniel, he made you feel like the only interesting person in a room full of interesting people. He remembered how I took my coffee. He put my name forward for the Ashcroft residential project, my first real lead role. At the firm's spring party, we ended up on the fire escape together, both a little warm from wine, and he'd tucked a piece of hair behind my ear and said, "Lo. I don't usually do this with people I work with," and I thought, this is it, this is the beginning of something, and then his phone buzzed and he glanced at it. And something in his face closed like a door. "I should get that," he said, and went inside and didn't come back to the fire escape. I told myself it didn't mean anything. I told myself that a lot that spring. Meanwhile, the violets kept coming. Every Monday, like clockwork, like a ritual someone else was keeping for reasons I couldn't guess. There was one other person on the 14th floor who was always there before I was, though I'd never really thought about it until later, Sam Ortiz, who did maintenance and building services for our floor and 2 others. He fixed the flickering light above the copier. He reset the thermostat when the conference room turned into a sauna during meetings. He came around 6 most mornings, before the cleaning crew even, and I knew this because I was an early riser too, and some mornings we were the only 2 people in an otherwise empty office. Trading a nod, sometimes a few words, while the coffee machine groaned awake. Cold one today, he said once, setting down a new filter in the break room while I stood there in my coat, waiting for the pot to fill. Aren't they all? I said. I miss Portland winters. Feels dumb to say that about Seattle, I know. He almost smiled. Sam didn't smile big, just a small shift at the corner of his mouth like he was rationing it. Nothing dumb about missing home. I didn't think much of it at the time. He was quiet, steady, the kind of person everyone in an office relies on and almost nobody really sees. I said good morning to him. I asked how his weekend was and actually waited for the answer, which, I'd learn much later, was not something most people at Hallie's and Cross bothered to do. I knew his coffee order because I'd picked it up for him once during a supply run and just kept doing it, black, no sugar, extra hot. I knew he had a niece he talked about on Fridays, softly proud, the way you talk about a kid who isn't yours but feels like it. None of that seemed significant, it was just Sam. A fact of the mornings, like the violets, it was Rachel who noticed the pattern first in week 7, tapping her pen against her coffee cup like she'd cracked a case. Okay, hear me out. What if it's Daniel? It's not Daniel. Why not? You two have chemistry like a science fair volcano. Because Daniel doesn't seem like the type to do something for 11 weeks without telling anyone, I said, and even as I said it, I heard how it sounded, not like a defense of him, but an accusation. Then who? I don't know, that's the whole problem. I decided finally to actually solve it, not with a webcam. Rachel would be disappointed, but the old-fashioned way. I told the security desk downstairs I'd left something urgent in my office and needed to come in unusually early on a Sunday night, technically Monday, just after midnight. And I sat in the dark of the empty 14th floor with a thermos of coffee and my coat still on, waiting. Nobody came at midnight, nobody came at 3. Around 5, I dozed off in my chair despite myself, and when I startled awake at 6:10, my heart lurched because there on my desk sat the violets. Damp-stemmed brown paper exactly as always. I'd missed it. Whoever it was had come and gone while I slept 20 feet away. I could have cried from the sheer, stupid unfairness of it. Instead, I heard the break room door swing, the clink of the coffee pot, and I got up and walked out there half delirious with exhaustion and said, too loudly for 6 in the morning. Did you see anyone come up here in the last hour? Sam turned, coffee filter in hand. And there was something in his face for just a second, something quick and unguarded, before it smoothed back into its usual careful stillness. No, he said, just you, you're here early. I fell asleep at my desk trying to catch the flower person, I admitted, laughing at myself despite the disappointment sitting heavy in my chest. 11 weeks, Sam, 11 weeks and I still don't know. Maybe some things aren't supposed to be caught, he said. Maybe you're supposed to just let them keep happening. I remember thinking it was a strange thing to say. I remember thinking about it for the rest of that day, in the margins of a floor plan I was supposed to be revising and not knowing why. The twist, when it came, didn't come from a stakeout at all. It came because I forgot my badge. 2 Mondays later, I left my apartment in a rush, halfway to the bus stop before I realized my badge was still sitting on my kitchen counter. I doubled back, missed my usual bus, caught the next one, and by the time I reached the building it was nearly 6:15, earlier than my usual 7:40. Later than whatever ungodly hour the violets had always beat me by. The lobby was empty except for the overnight guard reading a paperback. The elevator opened onto a dim 14th floor, most of the lights still on their motion sensor dim setting, and I walked toward my office already resigned to another week of not knowing. That's when I saw him. Sam at the far end of the hallway near the freight elevator, unwrapping a small bundle of violets from a plastic grocery bag, checking his watch. And starting his usual round, except this time his usual round bent, unmistakably, toward my office. I stopped where I was, he didn't see me yet. I watched him walk into my office, set the violets down exactly where they always sat, square in the center of the desk. And then paused just for a second, his hand resting flat on the wood beside them, like he was steadying himself, or saying something he'd never let himself say out loud. Sam, he turned so fast the empty grocery bag crinkled in his fist. For a moment neither of us said anything. The overhead lights buzzed on fully now, sensing movement, washing out whatever privacy the dimness had given him. It's you, I said, not a question. I don't know why I needed to say it anyway. He didn't try to deny it, which somehow made it worse, or better, I couldn't tell yet. He just stood there, jaw tight, looking like a man who'd been quietly caught at something he'd built his whole morning routine around hiding. 11 weeks, I said, almost 12. Sam, why didn't you? I stopped. I didn't even know how to finish the sentence. Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you sign the card? Why me? Because you're you, he said finally, quiet, like it cost him something to say it plainly, and I'm the guy who fixes the thermostat. It's fine, Josie, it's not a complaint. I know how this building works, I know who gets noticed and who doesn't. I wasn't trying to be noticed, he looked down at the violets still sitting between us. My mom used to grow these. On the windowsill, back home, in coffee cans because we couldn't afford real pots. She used to say if you really love someone, you don't announce it. You just keep showing up quietly the same way until they can't imagine the week without you in it somewhere. She did that with my dad for 40 years. I always thought it sounded old-fashioned. Then I met you and it didn't anymore. I didn't say anything, I don't think I could have. You're the only person in this whole building who ever asked me a question and waited around for the answer, he went on, quieter now. Like the confession was running out of momentum, but not out of truth. You know my coffee order, you know my niece's name, you say good morning like you mean it. I started leaving the violets because I didn't know how to say any of that without it sounding, he exhaled, without it sounding like too much, so I said it the smallest way I knew how. Every Monday. So even if nothing ever came of it. You'd start your week knowing somebody out there thought you were worth showing up for. 12 weeks of Mondays rearranged themselves in my head all at once, every small kindness I'd taken for granted as just Sam being Sam. Every quiet good morning, every time he'd remembered something I'd said in passing and brought it up weeks later like it mattered. It hadn't been nothing, it had been the opposite of nothing. It had been the most consistent, patient act of care anyone had shown me in 18 months of trying to build a life in a city that hadn't yet felt like home. And Daniel, charming, golden, unreachable Daniel, had never once in 2 years done anything half as brave. Why today? I asked. Why let me catch you? I didn't, Sam said, and for the first time something like a real smile broke through, rueful and warm. You caught yourself. I just forgot to check my watch. I laughed, a wet, unsteady sound, and something in my chest cracked open the way it does right before it heals. We ended up on the rooftop garden an hour later, the one the firm kept for client photos and never actually used, gray Seattle morning breaking slow over the water. Both of us skipping our first meeting without either of us caring. I asked him everything I hadn't known to ask in 18 months, where he grew up, why he took this job, what he wanted before life pointed him somewhere else. Whether he still had his mother's violets. He asked me things too, real things, the kind of questions that meant he'd actually been listening every single morning by the coffee machine, filing me away like something worth remembering. At some point it started to rain, the soft, sideways kind Seattle specializes in, and neither of us moved to go inside. He looked at me like he was still deciding whether he was allowed to, and I closed the last of the distance myself, because I was done waiting for someone to be brave when I could be brave instead. The kiss was quiet and certain, rain in both our hair, 12 weeks of Mondays finally landing exactly where they'd always been headed. When we finally pulled back, he pressed his forehead to mine and laughed under his breath, disbelieving, like a man who'd never let himself imagine this part actually happening. Daniel found out eventually the way office things always find their way around. He caught me at the coffee machine a week later, something unreadable in his face. Ortiz. The maintenance guy, his name is Sam, I said, and he's the best thing that's happened to me since I moved to this city, and I meant it so plainly that Daniel didn't have a comeback ready. For once. I heard later through Rachel that he'd been quietly seeing someone in the Portland office the whole time, on and off, complicated, never quite serious enough to mention. Never quite over enough to let go of either. It explained the fire escape, it explained the phone that always buzzed at exactly the wrong moment. I wasn't angry in the end. Just grateful the truth had found me before I'd built anything real on top of a maybe. Sam and I have been together over a year now. He still leaves violets on my desk sometimes, though the rituals changed shape. Some Mondays they're waiting for me at my apartment door instead, or tucked into my bag when I'm not looking, or once memorably, growing in a real terracotta pot on my windowsill, a cutting from the coffee cans his mother still keeps on her porch in Tacoma. He says he'll never fully stop doing it. Says some habits are worth keeping even after the mystery's gone, especially after the mystery's gone, because that's when it stops being about being caught and starts being about choosing each other. Over and over on purpose. I think about that first Monday sometimes, how close I came to just tossing the violets in the break room trash, assuming they were a mistake. Assuming nothing that quiet could possibly be meant for me. I'm glad some part of me knew better than to let it go. I'm glad I kept showing up too. Thank you so much for listening to this one with me. If you're new here, this channel is all about stories like Josie's The Quiet. Real kind of love that doesn't announce itself with fireworks but shows up anyway week after week, until you can't imagine your life without it. If that's the kind of story you love too, stick around and subscribe, because there's a lot more where this came from, and I'd love to know, has anything like this ever happened to you? A quiet gesture from someone you never expected, or someone hiding in plain sight the whole time. Or maybe you've watched it happen to someone close to you, the slow kind of falling that nobody sees coming until it's already happened. Tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one, and honestly, they're my favorite part of putting these stories together. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and don't be afraid to notice the people who have been quietly showing up for you all along.